Javier Westwood sat in the corner office on the 42nd floor of Westwood Group, staring out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. This skyscraper, with its gleaming glass panels and intricately etched company logo, was the symbol of his success, a 35-year-old CEO, cold, sharp, and never one to let emotions interfere with business. But today, he felt like punching a hole through the glass desk in front of him. An annual charity gala for all employees? Javier repeated, his voice low but razor-sharp. He slammed the stack of documents down on the desk, startling the administrative assistant standing across from him. Does the board think this is an amusement park? We're a media law firm, not a non-profit organization. Mr. Westwood, the assistant, a middle-aged woman named Margaret, adjusted her glasses and tried to keep her voice calm. The board believes the event will help improve the company's image, especially after, well, the recent articles about our charity fund. Javier frowned. Those articles, whispers about Westwood Group's charity fund lacking transparency, had been keeping him up at night. Not because he doubted the legality of the fund. He had handed full control to Camilla, the PR director, and his ex-girlfriend, and she always made sure everything appeared perfect. But the public never forgives a stain, whether it's real or not. Fine, Javier growled, standing up and folding his arms. If they want a party, they'll get a party. But I'm not responsible if someone gets drunk and starts dancing on a table. Margaret nodded, jotting something into her notepad before leaving Javier alone with a mess of tangled thoughts. He hated elaborate events. Expensive wine, fake smiles, empty speeches. It was all theater to mask the truth that no one actually cared about charity. But he had no choice. The board had spoken, and Javier Westwood never defied orders, even if he loathed them. That afternoon, in a lavish conference room with ebony wood tables and a massive LED screen, Camilla entered like a movie star. Her golden hair curled to perfection, her form-fitting dress accentuating every curve, and a smile that could make anyone forget what they were about to say. But Javier wasn't swayed. He and Camilla had broken up the previous year, and although she was still an exceptional PR director, he always felt a strange distance between them. Javier, you can't invite all the employees, Camilla said, her voice sweet but sharp like a candy-coated dagger. She took the seat across from him, tapping her red-painted nails on the table. The charity gala is a chance to connect with major partners, donors, the elite. If you invite the whole bunch of low-level staff, it'll turn into a cheap class reunion. Javier raised an eyebrow, eyes still on his laptop screen. Camilla, the board has made its decision. I don't have time to argue about who deserves to hold a champagne glass. Camilla tilted her head, her blue eyes flashing with anger. Do you know how much work I've put into organizing this event? I even invited reporters from the Times. If some logistics guy gets drunk and makes a scene, who do you think will take the blame? Me, not you. Javier stopped typing. He looked at Camilla, and for a rare moment, he felt amused. Not because she was wrong, she actually had a point, but the way she always wanted to control everything from the guest list to how he should smile in front of a camera made him want to stir things up. All right, Javier said calmly, though his eyes glinted with mischief. If you're so worried about low-level staff, I'll make sure all of them are invited, even the new assistant. Camilla blinked. Who? Javier skimmed through the employee list on his screen, stopping at a name he barely recognized, Izzy Lynn. The new assistant, employed for less than 3 months, always showing up with loosely tied curls and oversized round glasses. She was practically invisible in the office, always head down, quiet, and never once catching his attention. Perfect. Izzy Lynn, Javier said, the corner of his mouth lifting into a rare smile. She'll be invited, and I'll send the email myself to make sure she shows up. Camilla's mouth fell open. Then she let out a laugh as if she'd just heard a joke. Izzy? That girl who looks like she walked out of a public library? Javier, you're kidding, right? But Javier didn't reply. He opened his inbox and drafted a short email. To Ms. Lynn, you're invited to attend Westwood Group's annual charity gala at the Grand Meridian Hotel this Saturday evening. This is an opportunity to connect with the team. We hope to see you there. Javier Westwood, he hit send, a strange sense of satisfaction rising in his chest. If Camilla wanted an elite event and the board wanted a charity gala to boost the company's image, then he'd make sure it became a show worth watching. In her small corner office, Izzy Lynn sat in front of her computer, paperwork stacked high around her. She pushed up her glasses, rereading the email she had just received, and nearly dropped her coffee. An invitation from Javier Westwood himself? For her? She read the email 3 more times, searching for any sign it was a prank, but there was nothing besides the cold, professional tone of her boss. Izzy wasn't naive. She knew how this office worked: fake smiles, handshakes masking ambition, and secrets buried beneath glossy surfaces. She hadn't come to Westwood Group to be a long-term assistant. The nonprofit organization she worked with had suspected the company's charity fund lacked transparency, donations weren't reaching those in need, and the financial reports were full of gaps. Izzy was here to find evidence, and she'd kept herself invisible for that very reason. But this invitation, it changed everything. A charity gala was the perfect place to observe, to eavesdrop on executive conversations, and maybe, just maybe, find a clue about the fund. Izzy smiled, then typed her reply. To Mr. Westwood, I'll attend. Thank you. Izzy Lynn. She hit send, her heart beating a little faster. This wasn't the excitement of an assistant invited to a fancy event. It was the thrill of someone who had just seen a secret door crack open. Back in his office, Javier read Izzy's reply and, for the first time all day, paused. Just one line short, simple, no fluff, but something about it made him frown. He wasn't sure why he was intrigued. Maybe it was her calm tone, or the way she didn't show any excitement like most employees would. He closed his laptop, stood up, and looked out the window. The charity gala, he thought, might turn out to be more interesting than he expected. In the conference room, Camilla scrolled through the final guest list on her phone. She smiled, satisfied with the list of powerful names, people who would solidify her position in the company and in Javier's eyes. But when she heard that Javier had invited Izzy Lynn, her smile froze. Her? Camilla muttered, tapping her nails on the table. An assistant? What game is he playing? She had no idea that inside her own company, a much bigger game had already begun, and Izzy Lynn wasn't the pawn she thought she was. You're watching Soul Stories, where every story whispers of love, healing, and hope. Let us know which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and be a part of our journey. Now stay with us. The story is just beginning. The Grand Meridian Hotel, Manhattan's crown jewel, sparkled like a crystal palace beneath towering chandeliers. The grand ballroom was adorned with white silk ribbons, purple orchids, and glittering champagne flutes balanced on silver trays. The soft strains of a violin floated through the air, blending with the chatter of the elite renowned lawyers, powerful donors, and hungry reporters. This was Westwood Group's annual charity gala, but no one was here purely for charity. People came to flaunt, to network, and to make sure their names landed in tomorrow's headlines. Javier stood in a corner of the room, a glass of whiskey in hand, his eyes sweeping across the crowd like a hawk. He despised events like this, the fake smiles, the calculated handshakes. But he knew his role: show up, give a speech, and make sure Westwood Group remained the brightest name in media law. Tonight, he wore a perfectly tailored black suit, his hair slicked back neatly, but his expression was ice cold. Javier, you look like you're at a funeral. Camilla glided up beside him, her voice sweet but her eyes sharp. She wore a shimmering silver gown that hugged every curve and turned heads wherever she walked. Smile a little. The reporters are right over there. Javier took a sip of his whiskey without replying. He didn't care about any of that. His joke invitation to Izzy Lynn was still bothering Camilla, and frankly, the entire office had been buzzing for days about him inviting a nobody assistant to such a glamorous affair. Some thought he was trying to make Camilla jealous. Others figured he was just bored and stirring chaos. Javier didn't care. He just wanted the night to be over. But then, the ballroom doors opened, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Izzy Lynn walked in without hesitation. The red dress she wore wasn't flashy, no sequins, no bold cutouts, but it hugged her figure with quiet elegance, highlighting her softly curled hair and sharp brown eyes. Tonight, she wasn't wearing glasses. and that simple change made her face look almost unrecognizable, like she had stepped out of a painting. For a moment, the room was silent. Then whispers rippled out like waves. "Is that the assistant? Izzy Lynn? No way! What is she doing here?" Javier froze. His whiskey glass hovered in midair. For 3 full seconds, he forgot how to breathe. This wasn't the Izzy Lynn he'd seen before, the girl always looking down, silently sorting papers and brewing coffee in the office. This woman, she was radiant. Not because of the dress, but because of the confidence that radiated from every step she took. Her gaze swept the room, calm, clear, and precise, as if she knew exactly what she was doing. Next to Javier, Camilla gripped her champagne glass tighter. "Who does she think she is?" she muttered, venom in her voice. Then, unable to resist, she stepped forward, a fake smile plastered across her face. "Izzy, right? I didn't expect you to actually show up. That dress must have cost you a month's salary." The entire room seemed to hold its breath again, waiting to see how the invisible assistant would respond. But Izzy simply tilted her head and smiled gently, as if speaking to a child. "Thanks for your concern, Miss Camilla, but I borrowed the dress from a friend. And as for showing up, I figured Mr. Westwood's invitation was reason enough. Don't you think?" Her tone was soft, but every word landed like a blade. A few guests chuckled under their breath. Camilla's face stiffened, her smile twisting awkwardly. She opened her mouth to retort, but Izzy had already turned away, walking gracefully toward the bar, leaving Camilla standing there, hand trembling slightly around her champagne glass. Back in the corner, Javier felt something strange stir inside him. It wasn't just Izzy's appearance, though. He couldn't deny how stunning she looked. It was the way she handled Camilla, not loud, not boastful, just one quiet sentence that shifted the entire room's attention in her favor. He had never seen anyone do that to Camilla, not even him. At the bar, Izzy accepted a glass of wine and tried to steady her breathing. Her heart was pounding. She hadn't come to draw attention. Her mission tonight was to observe, to listen, and to uncover any leads about Westwood Group's charity fund. But the stares she felt, including the one burning into her from the corner, made her feel like she was walking a tightrope. She wasn't naive. She knew Javier's invitation had been a joke, likely meant to rile up Camilla, but she didn't care. Tonight she would take whatever opportunity she could get. She sipped her wine and scanned the room. Donors chatted animatedly. A few Westwood Group executives whispered in corners. And Camilla, after that earlier exchange, was trying to regain her composure by laughing with a reporter. Izzy mentally recorded every detail, every face. If there was any conversation involving the charity fund, she would hear it. But then, a careless moment broke her concentration. As she turned, her sleeve brushed against a waiter's tray, and a glass of red wine toppled to the floor. It shattered with a sharp crack, the sound drawing all eyes once again. Izzy immediately crouched down to pick up the pieces, but before she could reach them, a hand extended toward her, holding a perfectly folded white handkerchief. "Careful, you'll stain the dress," Javier said, his voice calm and low. He stood before her, tall and composed, his gaze locked on hers. Izzy looked up, slightly startled. She accepted the handkerchief, dabbed her hands, and offered a polite smile. "Thank you, sir. I'm okay." She tried to keep her tone light, but his eyes made her feel as though she were being seen through completely. He didn't smile, didn't say another word, just gave a small nod and straightened. She stood up and handed the handkerchief back. "I'll reimburse the wine," she joked, hoping to ease the tension. "No need," Javier replied, his voice still cool, though his gaze had softened just a little. He tucked the handkerchief into his pocket, then turned and walked away, leaving Izzy standing there, her heart racing more than she cared to admit. As Izzy melted back into the crowd, Javier returned to his corner, his hand still clutching the handkerchief in his jacket pocket. He didn't understand why he had offered it to her, a small gesture. But for him, it felt unnatural. From across the room, he watched her speak to a donor, her smile both warm and unreadable. Who was she? An ordinary assistant couldn't silence a room with a single line, and an ordinary assistant certainly shouldn't be distracting him like this. Across the ballroom, Camilla clutched her wine glass tightly, her eyes sharp and fixed on Izzy. She didn't know what that assistant was hiding, but she swore she would find out. As for Javier, he took another sip of whiskey, forcing himself to focus on the speech he would soon deliver. But in his mind, the image of Izzy in that red dress refused to leave. The ballroom at the Grand Meridian Hotel still glowed under the lights, but the atmosphere had relaxed after the evening's formal speeches. Guests were loosening up, laughter echoed softly, and the clink of glasses grew more frequent. Javier Westwood stood near the bar, a fresh glass of whiskey in hand, trying to focus on a conversation with a key donor. But his eyes kept drifting toward Izzy Lynn, who was gliding through the crowd with practiced ease like a small fish cutting through a fast current, leaving no trace behind. After her earlier clash with Camilla, Izzy had seemingly returned to her invisible assistant role, polite greetings, friendly smiles, nothing that drew too much attention. But Javier couldn't shake her from his mind. He told himself it was just curiosity. A CEO should know who his employees really were, right? But deep down, he felt a strange unease, as if Izzy were hiding something much bigger than the quiet confidence she carried. Suddenly, a middle-aged man in a gray suit, wearing a press badge, approached Izzy as she stood near the buffet. He smiled warmly, but his eyes were sharp, the eyes of a seasoned journalist. "Ms. Lynn, isn't it? Izzy Lynn from the Chicago Project. I'm Paul Grayson, the Tribune. I covered your vocational program for immigrants 2 years ago. What a surprise to see you here." Izzy froze for a moment, the glass of orange juice in her hand trembling slightly. She quickly regained her composure and offered a professional smile. "Mr. Grayson, nice to see you again. I didn't expect you'd remember that project." "Of course I do," Paul laughed heartily, drawing the attention of nearby guests. "You helped over 300 immigrants find stable jobs through that program. You handled everything from securing funding to corporate partnerships. I even wrote that you were a small flame making a big difference. So what are you doing at Westwood Group? Surely not just assisting?" His question dropped like a stone into a still pond. Several nearby guests, including some Westwood Group executives, turned their heads toward Izzy. Camilla, not far away, tightened her grip on her champagne glass, her eyes flashing with suspicion. Even Javier, mid-conversation with a donor, paused, his ears honing in on every word. Izzy smiled faintly and set her juice on the table. "I'm just an assistant, Mr. Grayson. Westwood Group is an interesting place to learn, and I'm doing my best to contribute." Her words were modest, but her tone carried a quiet gravity, sincere, yet somehow inspiring, as if she were hinting at a larger story just beneath the surface. Paul nodded, clearly impressed. "You're too humble, but I bet you'll make waves here too, just like in Chicago. If you ever have time, I'd love to do a follow-up, maybe a piece on young changemakers in the community." "Maybe one day," Izzy replied smoothly, steering the conversation away. "Thank you for remembering me." She nodded politely, then slipped into the crowd before Paul could ask anything more. Javier stood still, the whiskey in his hand suddenly feeling heavy. Izzy Lynn, the woman he had barely noticed over the past 3 months, had once led a project that helped hundreds of immigrants. He had never thoroughly reviewed her resume, a rare mistake for a CEO who prided himself on control. He vaguely recalled something about nonprofit experience, but had dismissed it as just background noise before she joined Westwood Group. But what stunned him more was a memory that suddenly resurfaced. About 2 years ago, Camilla had pitched a partnership proposal from a nonprofit based in Chicago, a vocational training program for immigrants. She had scoffed at the idea, calling it idealistic and too small scale to align with Westwood Group's brand. Javier, caught up in a major litigation case at the time, had agreed without looking into it. He remembered Camilla's exact words. "We don't need these little side projects wasting our time." Could that have been Izzy's program? A knot tightened in Javier's stomach. He looked toward Izzy, who was now chatting calmly with a server, her smile serene, as if the entire encounter with the journalist had never happened. But now he could no longer see her as an invisible assistant. She was a puzzle, a riddle that made him feel both intrigued and uneasy. A conflict stirred within him. Part of him questioned Izzy. Why would someone like her settle for being an assistant at Westwood Group? What was she really here for? But another part, deeper, quieter, felt ashamed. He had dismissed her work, indirectly invalidated her efforts, all because he trusted Camilla's judgment without looking further. Javier took a sip of whiskey, trying to focus, but his thoughts were already consumed by Izzy. Izzy, meanwhile, struggled to keep her breathing steady. The conversation with Paul Grayson had been a minor disaster. The last thing she wanted was anyone digging into her past, especially while she was here on a secret mission, gathering evidence that Westwood Group's charity fund was anything but transparent. She had gone to great lengths to remain invisible in the office, but tonight she had drawn far too much attention. She glanced across the ballroom and saw Javier watching her from a distance, his eyes cold but contemplative. She reminded herself to be cautious not just with Camilla, but with him too. As the gala neared its end, Izzy felt suffocated. Quietly, she slipped out of the ballroom and onto the hotel's expansive balcony. The night breeze was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of the city smoke, coffee, and unfinished dreams. She leaned against the railing, gazing down at the glittering Manhattan skyline, trying to collect her thoughts. She had overheard some useful snippets during the evening, a CFO mentioning unaccounted expenses in the charity fund, a donor complaining about vague financial reports, but she still needed hard proof, and she knew she was walking a dangerous line. Javier stood at the doorway leading to the balcony, his glass now empty. He saw Izzy standing there alone, small but strong beneath the golden light. There was something about her that made him want to step closer, to ask who she really was, why she was here, and why she made him feel off balance. He wanted to ask about Chicago, about the project, about why someone like her would choose to be a mere assistant in his company. But he didn't move. He just stood there, silently watching, his fingers tightening around the empty glass. What he didn't realize in that moment was that he had already begun to see Izzy Lynn differently, not as an employee, but as someone who could upend everything he thought he knew. From inside the ballroom, Camilla noticed Javier's absence. Her eyes narrowed as she looked toward the balcony and saw him standing alone, watching Izzy. Her nails tapped against her champagne flute, a cruel plan already forming in her mind. She didn't know who Izzy Lynn really was, but she swore she'd find out and make sure she disappeared from Westwood Group and from Javier's life. On the Monday morning following the charity gala, the Westwood Group office in Manhattan buzzed with more energy than usual, and it wasn't because of work. Employees huddled in small groups around computer screens, whispering and giggling. A video clip from the Grand Meridian Hotel party had gone viral at lightning speed, and its headline was dominating social media platforms. The assistant who left the elites speechless. In the clip, Izzy, elegant in her red dress, smiled calmly as she delivered her cutting response to Camilla's snide remark. As for daring to attend, I figured Mr. Westwood's invitation was reason enough, don't you think? The line, sharp yet graceful, had stunned the entire room, and now it had become an internet sensation. Meme accounts flooded platforms with images of Camilla's stunned expression, overlaid with captions like, "When you think you're the queen but get knocked out by the assistant." Izzy, on the other hand, was hailed as a phenomenon, a no-name woman who made the elite reevaluate themselves. Javier sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor, scrolling through his phone, face unreadable. He had watched the clip at least 3 times, not out of curiosity, but because he couldn't understand why he couldn't stop. Every time Izzy appeared on screen, something stirred in him, not quite admiration, not irritation either, but something distracting, something disarming. He set his phone down and forced himself to focus on the flood of emails, but the phone rang before he could make any progress. "Westwood," he answered, his voice cold. "Javier, have you seen that clip?" barked Harold Crane, one of their major partners, clearly agitated. "The whole world is laughing at Camilla, and she's our PR director. The company's image is on the line. What are you going to do about that assistant?" Javier's brow furrowed, his grip tightening around the phone. "The assistant isn't the problem, Harold. Camilla brought this on herself." Harold cleared his throat, clearly displeased. "I don't care who's to blame. We need to control the narrative before it spirals. Call me when you have a plan." He hung up, leaving Javier with a fresh headache. Javier stood and looked out the window. The video was undeniably a PR disaster. But strangely, he wasn't angry at Izzy. On the contrary, he felt proud, though he hated admitting it. The way she handled Camilla, how she subtly turned the room in her favor, that was something even he, a sharp CEO, rarely accomplished. But who was she? No ordinary assistant could carry that level of confidence. And after what the journalist had revealed about Chicago, Javier was more convinced than ever that Izzy was hiding something. In her small office, Izzy sat at her desk, trying to focus on organizing Javier's meeting schedule. But the whispering from coworkers just outside made it impossible to ignore. She'd already seen the clip a kind colleague had sent it to her with a laughing emoji. Izzy wasn't sure whether to laugh or worry. She had attended the gala to gather intel on the charity fund, not to become a viral sensation. Now all eyes in the office were on her, and that made her mission far more dangerous. She opened her email, checking for any updates from the nonprofit organization she was working with undercover. Nothing new, but she knew they were waiting for progress. She'd overheard a few hints at the gala, a CFO mentioning unclear expenditures, a donor complaining about murky reports, but nothing definitive enough to expose misappropriation. She needed more time. And more importantly, she needed to stay invisible. The viral video had blown that plan apart. With a sigh, she stood and decided to bring some waffles to the office, a small, harmless gesture. She had 3 boxes of homemade waffles in her bag. She distributed 2 among her coworkers, then hesitated briefly before knocking on Javier's door, unsure whether this was a good idea or if she was digging her own grave. Javier looked up when he heard the knock, surprised to see Izzy step in. She wore a simple white blouse and pencil skirt, her curls loosely tied back, the familiar round glasses back on her face. The radiant woman in the red dress was gone, but her sharp eyes were the same, as if she always knew exactly what she was doing. "Mr. Westwood," Izzy said gently, but without timidity. She set a small paper box on his desk. "I brought waffles. If you're not too picky, give them a try." Javier blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "Waffles?" he repeated, skeptical. Izzy smiled, a mischievous spark in her eyes that made him want to smile too. "That's right. Nothing saves a rough day like waffles. Consider it a thank you for the gala invitation." He looked at the box, then at her. For a moment, he forgot he was the cold, composed CEO of Westwood Group. He opened the box, took a bite, and the crisp sweetness surprised him. He hadn't even realized how hungry he was. He finished the piece in silence and, without thinking, muttered, "That's really good." Izzy's grin widened, her eyes lighting up. "Told you, waffles never fail." She turned to leave, but Javier called after her. "Ms. Lin," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Are you all right after that video?" Izzy paused, clearly taken aback by the question. She looked at him as if weighing whether to be honest. "I'm all right, Mr. Westwood, just didn't expect to go viral like that." She shrugged, her smile a mix of self-deprecation and sincerity. Javier nodded, but his gaze lingered. He watched her longer than usual, noticing little things he had never seen before, the way she tilted her head when speaking, how she tapped her finger against her sleeve when thinking. When she left the room, he felt an odd emptiness, like the space had dimmed slightly in her absence. For the rest of the day, Javier couldn't stop noticing her. He realized she managed emails at a lightning pace, responded to partner requests with finesse, and anticipated his preferences without being told. When she brought coffee to the conference room, he noticed she placed his cup exactly where he liked it without needing to ask. The little details he had once overlooked now unsettled him. She wasn't just an assistant. She was something he couldn't define. Meanwhile, in her office, Camilla scrolled furiously through the internet memes mocking her. She gripped her phone so tightly that her red-painted nails nearly dug into her palm. She didn't know who Izzy Lin really was, but she vowed to find out and to make her pay for the humiliation. She fired off a text to an old contact, a private investigator. "Find out everything about Izzy Lin. I need to know what she's hiding." Later that evening, Izzy sat alone in her small office checking her phone. A new message from the nonprofit lit up the screen. "We need evidence as soon as possible. Don't let emotions get in the way. That charity fund is bleeding millions." She tightened her grip on the phone, her eyes conflicted. She remembered the look in Javier's eyes when he ate the waffle, his warm voice when he asked if she was okay. She knew she wasn't allowed to get soft, but her heart, as always, refused to listen. She tucked the phone away, stood up, and left the office, carrying with her a question she didn't dare answer. Could she finish the mission and still protect what was quietly growing in her heart? Wednesday at Westwood Group was tense. The Manhattan office buzzed with a heavy atmosphere, not just because the viral clip titled "The Assistant Who Left the Elites Speechless" was still circulating, but also due to a flood of calls from major partners. They weren't happy. The company's image, something Camilla had worked hard to build, was under fire, all because of an unknown assistant named Izzy Lynn. And Camilla, with her pride and ambition, was determined to make Izzy the scapegoat. In the main conference room, its glass walls overlooking the Manhattan skyline, Camilla stood before the board of directors and several partners on video call. She wore a sharp white pantsuit, her blonde hair pulled into a high ponytail, voice sweet yet steely. "We can't let an assistant damage Westwood Group's reputation," she declared, her eyes scanning the room. "That video was a PR disaster, and Izzy Lynn is the reason. I recommend we terminate her immediately to send a message that we take our image seriously." Harold Crane, the partner who had previously confronted Javier, nodded from his screen. "I agree with Camilla. That assistant is becoming a liability. If she stays, our donors will think we've lost control." A few board members nodded, but none of them looked directly at Javier, who sat at the head of the table like a statue. Dressed in a black suit, arms crossed, his icy gaze swept across the room. He had heard enough. Camilla was presenting Izzy as a threat, but what irritated him most was that no one was speaking up for her. Izzy, the assistant, who handled emails with stunning efficiency and silenced a ballroom with one sentence. An unknown assistant? Number she was more than that. "Javier," Camilla turned toward him, her smile perfect, her eyes challenging. "You agree, don't you? We need to act fast." Javier said nothing. The room waited, thick with tension like the calm before a storm. He didn't fully understand Izzy, but he knew firing her would be a mistake. And Javier Westwood did not make mistakes. "No," he said, his voice low but firm. The room froze. "Izzy Lynn stays. She did nothing wrong. If you're looking to blame someone, maybe consider who actually caused that scene in the clip." His eyes slid toward Camilla, cold as steel. Camilla's jaw dropped, but she recovered quickly. "Javier, you can't be serious. She's just an assistant. We can't let personal feelings..." "Personal feelings?" he cut in sharply. "This is a business decision. Izzy is a competent employee, and I don't fire competent people over a viral video. If the company's image needs fixing, let Camilla handle it. That's her job, isn't it?" Silence. Harold coughed uncomfortably through the video feed, clearly displeased, but no one dared speak up. Camilla's fists clenched, her red-painted nails digging into her palms. She looked at Javier, eyes burning with rage and wounded pride. But he didn't care. For the first time, he had taken the side of someone he didn't fully understand, and it felt both strange and right. That afternoon, Javier was on his way to a client meeting when he tripped over a maintenance crew's power cable. He stumbled hard, the left side of his face slamming against the edge of the reception desk, leaving a vivid red scratch. "Damn it," he muttered, getting up and trying to act unfazed despite the sharp pain. The receptionist gasped and apologized profusely, but Javier waved it off and stepped into the elevator, scowling. When he returned to the office at the end of the day, Izzy was checking a printer in the corner of the meeting room, a minor task he'd assigned her to keep her away from the fallout of the earlier meeting. She looked up immediately and spotted the mark on his face. "Oh no, Mr. Westwood, what happened to your face?" she asked, a mix of concern and teasing in her voice. Javier shrugged, trying to downplay it. "I fell. It's nothing." Izzy shook her head, reached into her bag, and pulled out a small adhesive bandage. "Falling and ending up with that mark is not nothing. Sit. Let me take care of it." He started to decline, but her determined look made him relent. He sat down awkwardly as she stepped closer. Izzy gently cleaned the wound, then carefully applied the bandage. "Your facial muscles have been working overtime all day. Try relaxing," she joked, her playful smile lighting up the room. He let her do it, and for a moment her proximity disarmed him. Her breath smelled faintly of lavender and vanilla, And when she briefly touched his shoulder for balance, Javier instinctively reached for her hand and held it longer than necessary. Izzy looked up, surprised, but didn't pull away. Their eyes met, and time seemed to slow. Then Izzy smiled gently and withdrew her hand. "All done. You look a little less terrifying now." Javier didn't respond, but his heart was beating faster. As she turned away, he felt a strange emptiness, as if her leaving had taken some warmth with her. That morning, while checking the jam printer, Izzy found a stack of papers wedged beneath the frame near the wall. She was about to toss them when bold text on the first page caught her eye. "Charity Fund Financial Report. Draft." Her heart raced. This document was nothing like the company's public reports. It listed massive expenditures into ambiguous reserve accounts, ending with Camilla's signature. The numbers didn't add up, and one handwritten note in the margin sent a chill down her spine. "Delete before reporting to Javier and submitting to board." Izzy clutched the papers, her mind reeling. This was the proof she'd been searching for, evidence of misuse within the charity fund. But what shocked her most was that Javier clearly hadn't seen this. She folded the documents carefully and slipped them into her bag. Then she returned to fixing the printer, acting as though nothing had happened. Back at her desk, she checked her phone. A message from the nonprofit organization popped up. "Any updates? We need to act before they erase the trail." Izzy stared at the screen, her expression conflicted. Was Javier involved in any of this? Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. Friday at Westwood Group felt like a silent battleground. The Manhattan office buzzed with unspoken tension, hushed whispers, and sidelong glances. The viral video, the assistant who left the elite speechless, still hadn't died down. And Javier's decision to keep Izzy Lynn after the tense board meeting had left Camilla seething. Her pride and ambition couldn't bear being overshadowed by a so-called nobody. But Camilla didn't just want to win, she wanted to destroy Izzy. That morning, Camilla strutted into the open-plan office where employees tapped away at keyboards and murmured into phones. She wore a figure-hugging emerald dress, her golden hair glowing under the ceiling lights, but her face was ice cold. In her hand was a thin folder, and her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Izzy's modest desk. Javier was in a meeting with a client, but many mid-level staff and a few senior executives were present, an ideal audience for the spectacle Camilla was about to stage. "Izzy Lynn," Camilla called, her voice sweet but sharp as a blade. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Izzy, who had been organizing documents. Izzy paused, her hand trembling slightly around a pencil. She looked up, calm on the outside, though her heart pounded. "What are you talking about, Ms. Camilla?" she asked, voice soft but alert. Camilla smiled the smug grin of a cat that just cornered its prey. She lifted the folder and spoke louder, her words meant for everyone to hear. "Don't play innocent. I hired a private investigator to look into you. You used to work for a nonprofit called Justice Transparency, didn't you? The very organization preparing to sue Westwood Group for suspected misuse of our charity fund. You didn't come here to assist, you came to spy." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the office. A few employees gaped in disbelief. Others exchanged wide-eyed glances. Margaret, the senior admin assistant, leaned toward a coworker and whispered, "I knew she wasn't just a regular assistant." Izzy stood motionless, her gaze sweeping the room as she struggled to remain composed. She had prepared for the possibility of being exposed, but not this publicly and not so soon. Camilla stepped closer, voice triumphant. "You exploited this company's trust, Javier's trust, to gather intel. You thought you could outsmart all of us? I propose we fire her immediately, and maybe even call the police for invasion of privacy." Suddenly, the conference room door swung open. Javier entered, dressed in a crisp black suit, his face dark with frustration. He had ended his meeting early after hearing the commotion outside. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice low but commanding. Camilla turned to him, her tone softening but her eyes still sharp. "Javier, she's a spy. Izzy Lynn works for an organization trying to sue us. She lied to all of us, including you." Javier looked at Izzy, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. He felt like he'd been stabbed. Izzy, the woman he had started to trust, perhaps even more than that, was a liar? He felt betrayed. not just because she had worked for the opposing side, but because he had believed in her. "Izzy," he said, his voice strained and low. "Is it true?" Izzy took a deep breath and stood up. She knew there was no more hiding. "Yes," she replied, clearly but without arrogance. "I worked for Justice Transparency before I came here. They sent me to investigate the Westwood Group's charity fund because we suspected misconduct from you and your company." The room held its breath. Camilla's smile widened in triumph. Javier's fist clenched, his expression darkened. But Izzy continued, her voice softening. "But I stopped sending them updates last week because I realized you, Mr. Westwood, had no part in the wrongdoing. I didn't want to hurt someone who didn't deserve it." Javier blinked as if snapping out of a trance. "You stopped sending them updates?" he echoed, disbelief in his voice. Izzy nodded, her eyes locked with his, painfully sincere. "I found something worth protecting more than a lawsuit." She paused as if considering whether to say more, but simply offered a sad smile. "And I have the evidence not against you, but the person actually responsible." She pulled a set of photocopied documents from her bag draft financial reports she had found behind the office printer earlier that week. She handed them to Javier, her tone steady. "This is an internal draft prepared by Camilla. It shows millions diverted from the charity fund into untraceable reserve accounts. Her signature's at the bottom along with a handwritten note. Delete before submitting to Javier and the board." Camilla went pale. Her smile vanished. "You're making this up," she shouted, snatching the papers from Javier. "It's fake. I didn't do anything wrong." But Javier was already scanning the documents, his gaze razor sharp. The numbers didn't match the reports he'd signed. The annotations, the mismatched figures, the signature, everything was damning. The media buzz around the charity fund, once thought to be gossip, was beginning to look horrifyingly real. And this entire fund had been under Camilla's control. His voice dropped to a chilling tone. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Camilla stammered, her voice shaking. "Javier, you can't believe her. She's a spy. She's trying to pin this on me to save herself." But Javier didn't respond. He turned to Izzy, his expression a mix of fury and heartbreak. "You can leave," he said, cold but with a faint tremor in his voice. "We'll deal with the rest later." Izzy nodded silently. She gathered her things, a notebook, a pen, and a half-finished cup of coffee, and walked out of the office. The room was dead silent, except for the sound of her heels against the wooden floor. She didn't look back, but her heart felt heavier than ever. She had done the right thing, so why did it hurt this much? Javier stood frozen, still clutching the documents. He watched her disappear beyond the glass doors, her small frame swallowed by the hallway. He wanted to call her back, to ask why she hadn't told him the truth sooner, why she had made him feel like this. But he couldn't. The anger of being deceived tangled with the pain of realizing she had protected him even if it ruined her. Camilla, watching him closely, fell silent. She saw it in his eyes she had lost, not just to Izzy, but to Javier himself. But she swore. This wasn't over. Friday's rain poured over Manhattan like it was trying to wash away the city's secrets. Neon lights shimmered on the wet streets, and the towering Westwood Group building stood tall, amidst the storm, an unyielding fortress, cracked from within. On the 42nd floor, Javier Westwood sat alone in his office. The pale light from his computer screen cast stark shadows across his sharp features and conflicted eyes. His desk was buried in paperwork, but his mind was elsewhere. In front of him lay a handwritten letter, its slanted script unmistakably Izzy Lynn's, and a thick folder of documents, the final evidence of the charity fund scandal she had left for him before walking away. The letter was brief, but every word cut like a blade. "Mr. Westwood, I didn't come to your company just to be an assistant. I came to investigate, to gather evidence of the misuse of the Westwood Group's charity fund. I once believed you were part of that deception, and I was ready to expose everything. I tried to keep my distance, reminded myself not to trust, not to feel. But the heart doesn't listen to reason. I was wrong not to tell you from the start, and I'm sorry not just for hiding the truth, but for starting to see you with different eyes. Everything I have is in this folder. I've kept nothing for myself. I give it to you not as a threat, but because I believe you'll do the right thing." "Izzy," Javier read it again for the third time, his hands trembling slightly. He was stunned, not just because Izzy had left without a proper goodbye, but because of that line. The heart doesn't listen to reason. It left him feeling both furious and wounded, like she'd dropped a riddle into his life and vanished. He had trusted her, even if only a little, and she had deceived him. But if she truly meant to destroy him, why leave all the evidence behind and then walk away? He stood abruptly and opened the folder. The contents were chillingly thorough. Forged financial drafts, internal emails, handwritten notes, even wire transfer receipts to untraceable accounts. Every piece bore Camilla's fingerprints, her signature, her commanding tone, her arrogance. Javier's jaw tightened. He had entrusted the charity fund to Camilla because he believed she, with her polish and drive, would manage it well. But she hadn't just embezzled money, she had betrayed his trust. That very day, Javier ordered an internal investigation. He summoned the legal team and brought in an independent audit firm. He demanded a full review of the charity fund's financial history going back 3 years. The initial findings confirmed everything Izzy had revealed. Millions had been diverted into reserve accounts controlled solely by Camilla. Not a dollar had reached the organizations listed in their public reports. It felt like being stabbed all over again, not by Izzy, but by Camilla, someone he had once seen as an ally. That night, Javier left the office without an umbrella, stepping straight into the pouring rain. Cold drops soaked his black suit, but he didn't care. Under the flickering glow of streetlights, waves of emotion crashed through him. He was angry at Izzy for deceiving him, but also aching, because she'd handed over everything that could have ruined him, and chose to disappear instead. The heart doesn't listen to reason. What did she mean? And why did it make his heart race like this? Meanwhile, in a small apartment in Brooklyn, Izzy sat at her kitchen table, her face lit by the soft glow of a desk lamp. In front of her was a cup of cold tea and a half-packed suitcase. She had gathered all the evidence the organization needed, but she hadn't sent it to them for prosecution. She had sent it to him hoping he would do the right thing. But she hadn't stayed to face him, not because she was afraid, but because she couldn't bear to see the disappointment in his eyes. Her phone buzzed with a new message from the nonprofit. "You did well. We'll take it from here. Get some rest." But she didn't feel relieved. Her heart was heavy with thoughts of Javier. On Saturday morning, Javier summoned Camilla to the office. She walked in, still immaculate in a silk teal dress, but the nervous flicker in her eyes betrayed her. "Javier," she began, her voice shaky, "you don't actually believe her, do you? Izzy's a liar. She quotation mark." "Enough," Javier cut her off, voice cold as steel. On the desk in front of him was the preliminary audit report, confirming every one of Izzy's allegations. "You embezzled from the charity fund, Camilla. You deceived me, this company, and the people who trusted us. You're fired, effective immediately." Camilla's face went pale. She scrambled to defend herself. "Javier, I was trying to protect the company. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he said, rising to his feet and stepping toward her. "You exploited my trust. I suggest you turn yourself in." Camilla left without another word, but her eyes burned with resentment. Javier didn't care. He returned to his desk and stared at Izzy's letter. He knew he had to do the right thing, not just for the company, but for himself. He ordered a full expansion of the investigation, determined to bring complete transparency and restore the charity's integrity. But more than that, he wanted to find Izzy to ask her why she protected him, why she made him feel this way. But she was gone. And for the first time in his life, Javier Westwood felt truly out of control. Not of his company, not of his decisions, but of his own heart. 2 weeks after Izzy's resignation, Manhattan sparkled as always, but something in the air felt different. The early autumn rains had given way to soft sunlight, and the city seemed to be waiting for a shift, a moment of reckoning. At the Lincoln Conference Center, a press event titled "Transparency and Charity" had drawn hundreds of activists, journalists, nonprofit leaders. Bright stage lights illuminated banners bearing the words, "The future of charity, justice, and transparency." Izzy Lynn stood on stage in a simple yet elegant navy blue blazer dress. Her soft curls were half pinned back. She was no longer the invisible assistant from Westwood Group, nor the viral sensation from that infamous video. Today, she stood as herself, a woman who had once fought for justice and was now trying to reclaim her path after weeks of turmoil. Her voice rang out clearly, full of quiet conviction, as she spoke about the importance of integrity and charitable foundations. When donations don't reach the right hands, the community's trust is destroyed, Izzy said, her gaze sweeping across the auditorium. I've worked with small organizations where every dollar is carefully counted, but I've also seen places where greed overshadows goodwill. Transparency isn't just a duty, it's a promise to the people who believed in us. She never mentioned Westwood Group, nor did she name Camilla, but anyone who had followed the recent headlines understood what she was referring to. Though the charity fund scandal hadn't yet gone fully public, it was already a topic of heated discussion across forums and media outlets. Izzy spoke with sincerity, but every word weighed heavily on her. She still remembered the look in Javier's eyes as she left his office. She kept telling herself she had done the right thing, but why couldn't her heart let him go? As she finished her speech, the audience erupted in applause. Izzy simply gave a small smile and bowed her head in thanks. She stepped off the stage gracefully, trying to maintain composure, though her eyes were rimmed red, glistening beneath the spotlight like tears that hadn't fallen. Javier stood at the very back of the room, hidden in the shadow of the last row. The tension in his face hadn't eased in days. He hadn't slept well since Izzy left. Camila had since been arrested, and now all that remained was a sense of emptiness. He hadn't planned to come to this event. He'd read about it in the paper, knew Izzy would be speaking. He told himself there was no reason to see her. She had made her choice. But this morning, staring at his empty office, he'd gotten in his car and driven to the conference center anyway. When Izzy began to speak, Javier's heart tightened. Her voice, her sincerity, the way she quieted an entire auditorium, every word reminded him of why she had captured his attention in the first place. But more than that, he realized, he had been wrong. As Izzy stepped down from the stage, Javier stood up and walked toward the steps leading to the platform. The event coordinator, a middle-aged woman, intercepted him. "Sir, I'm sorry, you're not on the speaker list." "I'm Javier Westwood," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I need to speak. Just 5 minutes." The coordinator hesitated, but something in his eyes made her nod. He stepped onto the stage, the bright lights glaring down on him. The room fell silent, then rippled with murmurs as people recognized him, the CEO of Westwood Group, standing at the center of a brewing scandal. Javier took the mic and drew a deep breath. "I'm not on the list of speakers," he began, his deep voice resonating through the hall. "But I'm here because I owe all of you, and one person in particular, an apology." His eyes searched the front rows until they landed on Izzy. She stood motionless, wide-eyed, clearly shocked to see him. Javier continued, his tone uncharacteristically open. "I trusted the wrong people and dismissed those who deserved to be heard. I let my trust be exploited, and in doing so, I hurt those who deserve better. Izzy Lynn is the one who taught me that." The auditorium was silent, save for the clicking of cameras from the press. Javier paused, still looking only at her. "Westwood Group made serious mistakes with its charity fund. But starting today, I promise every transaction will be transparent. We will work with independent auditors to ensure that every dollar reaches its intended recipient, not for the sake of image, but because it's the right thing to do." He bowed his head, a humble gesture few expected from the famously stoic CEO. The crowd broke into thunderous applause, rising and echoing so loudly it drowned out even the background music. Izzy didn't clap. She just gave a small nod, her eyes still red, as if she were holding back tears. She didn't say a word, but the gesture was enough. Javier saw it. She had heard him. She had understood. The event ended amid buzzing conversations and swarms of reporters chasing speakers down hallways. Izzy quietly slipped away, making her way toward the exit corridor. She needed air, needed space to process what had just happened. Javier's apology, public, heartfelt, completely unguarded, had shaken her. But she didn't know if she could face him yet, not after everything that had passed between them. She stepped out the main doors, the golden afternoon sunlight warming her face. But then she froze. Javier was standing there, right outside the exit, hands in his suit pockets, his eyes locked on her as if she were the only thing that existed in the world. He didn't say a word. He didn't move. He just stood there waiting. Izzy took a deep breath and walked past him. She didn't speak, didn't linger, but as she passed, her hand lightly brushed against his, a brief touch, soft and fleeting, but full of meaning. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't a promise. It was a sign that she saw him, truly saw him. Javier remained still, feeling the warmth of her touch linger in his palm. He didn't call her back. He didn't follow. He just watched as she walked away, her small frame fading into the rhythm of Manhattan's evening crowd. And for the first time in years, Javier felt a flicker of hope. Not for the company, but for his own heart. You're watching Soul Stories exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment, we read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt, original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. 3 months had passed since the press conference, and Manhattan had slipped into winter's embrace, crisp winds, early Christmas lights, and that hush before the snow. Under Javier Westwood's leadership, the Westwood Group had changed. Its charity foundation was now overseen by an independent board, with every transaction made public on the company website. Slowly, the firm's tarnished reputation was being restored. But what captured the city's attention wasn't just financial reform, it was a new initiative, the Westwood Free Legal Aid Center, launched in partnership with the nonprofit Justice for All, the very organization where Izzy Lynn once worked. The center stood in a modest glass-fronted building in the Lower East Side, a brass plaque outside reading, "Justice for Everyone." Javier had personally overseen the project from selecting the location to recruiting volunteer attorneys. But he knew it wouldn't be complete without one person, the one who had made him question everything. One late autumn afternoon, Izzy received an email from Javier. No long explanations, no grand speech, just an invitation to meet at a small cafe near the new center. She hesitated, finger hovering over the screen, remembering the brief touch of his hand after the press event. She had tried to keep her distance, pouring herself into her nonprofit work, but her heart hadn't forgotten his eyes. Eventually, she replied, "I'll be there." The cafe was warm, filled with the scent of espresso and toasted bread. Javier sat waiting, dressed in a gray sweater and slacks, less CEO, more human. When Izzy entered in a soft blue knit coat, her curls loosely tied back, his heartbeat quickened. She sat across from him with a quiet smile. "Didn't expect you to be the cozy coffeehouse type, Mr. Westwood." "Call me Javier," he said, sliding a latte toward her. "And I didn't ask you here to talk about coffee." Izzy raised a brow. "Then why am I here?" Javier took a steady breath, his eyes unwavering. "I opened the Legal Aid Center in partnership with your organization, but we need someone to lead it, not an assistant, a partner. I want you to take that role, Izzy." Her eyes widened. "Me? After everything that happened?" He leaned forward, his voice low but certain. "This isn't about redemption. It's because I don't want to do the right thing if you're not part of it." The words stopped her. She searched his face, saw a sincerity there she hadn't seen before. Her instinct told her to say no to protect her heart, but then she smiled gently. "All right, Javier, but I should warn you, I'm impossible to work with." His laugh was rare but radiant. "I've been warned. I'm still all in." They began working together. The months that followed were filled with quiet, meaningful moments. The center helped dozens every week, from immigrants seeking visa help to families caught in housing disputes. Izzy and Javier argued about everything: flyer fonts, office paint colors, but every disagreement ended in laughter. Their bond didn't bloom in grand gestures. It was built in passing hand touches while exchanging folders, stolen glances during meetings, and the comfort of shared silence over lukewarm coffee after long days. They never used the word love, never posted selfies or hashtags, but everyone at the center could feel it. When Izzy and Javier were in the same room, the light felt different. One night, after a long day of consultations, Izzy fell asleep at her desk, papers scattered around her. She had stayed late to finalize a donor report, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Javier returned from checking files and found her like that, head resting on her arms, brow gently furrowed. Without a word, he took off his blazer and draped it over her shoulders. Then he sat beside her, placing his hand lightly over hers, fingertips brushing her skin. She didn't wake, but in her sleep, she instinctively leaned slightly toward him. Javier watched her, and something warm and unfamiliar flooded his chest. He didn't move. He simply stayed, letting the moment stretch, wishing it could last forever. A year later, the Legal Aid Center was a quiet success story. Dozens of families had been helped. More nonprofits began to collaborate. Westwood Group, now proudly transparent, had regained public trust. During the one-year anniversary celebration, a reporter from the Tribune, Paul Grayson, the same one who'd once spotted Izzy at that gala, approached them for a short interview. "This center is remarkable," Paul said. Mike aimed at them as they stood side by side beneath the brass plaque. "But I have to ask something the public's dying to know. Are you two in love?" The crowd burst into laughter. Izzy, with a mischievous glint in her eye, replied, "We just see each other every morning, argue about how to brew coffee, and collapse together at the end of the day. If that's love, I'm not entirely sure." She shrugged, her eyes twinkling. Javier, usually cold toward the press, surprised everyone. He stepped forward, voice steady and low. "I don't know if that's love either, but I know this: without her, I'm not me." Applause erupted. Izzy turned to him, something in her gaze brighter than anything she'd let show before. They didn't say anything else, but the way they stood, shoulder to shoulder, said everything. That night, after the guests had gone and the lights were dimmed, Izzy and Javier locked up the center together. The golden glow from the street lamps spilled through the glass, dancing across the hardwood floor. Izzy pulled on her coat, ready to leave, when Javier quietly took her hand. He said nothing, just held it, fingers interlacing with hers. They looked at each other under the soft yellow light. No need for declarations or grand speeches. Their hands remained clasped, not as a question, but as a promise. Izzy smiled, gently squeezing his fingers. Then they stepped outside into the cold New York night. Not as a couple with a title, but as two people who had found each other in their own time, in their own way. Their love needed no hashtags, no headlines. It was in the small things, the quiet touches, the lingering glances, and for them, that was enough.